This is Inconstant. Okay, hello everyone. This is Fahad, new episode of Inconstant. This is going to probably be the season finale for season 2. I'm quite busy with my other podcast, See-Through Panel, and a few other creative projects, and I want to take the podcast in another direction. But we've got a great guest today. My guest today is Dave Chawner. Dave is a #1 best-selling author, award-winning comic, presenter, and mental health campaigner. He's been on the BBC, ITV, and Channel 4. He's presented a series of BBC's Tomorrow's World and has written for The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Metro, The Cosmopolitan, GQ, and more. He uses humour in order to make mental health more accessible and open a dialogue with hard-to-reach groups. And I'll hand out Dave's social media stuff at the end. How you doing, Dave?
Good morning, mate. Yeah, not too bad. Feeling like I'm ticking along, as best as we all can at the moment. But yeah, it's sort of, I think sometimes it feels like wading through treacle.
Yes, I do. I do know what you mean by that. I think things are slowly starting to open back up again. Yeah, so I think a little bit of that mental fog, I think, is kind of lifting a bit. Anyway, so I'm going to be asking you a series of weird questions. If there's any question or any topic that you're not comfortable talking about, would you like to please give me a safety word, and we'll move on to a different topic?
Well, firstly, I think that's a great question. I'm going to go for one of my favourite words, which would be magnanimous, because I just think it's a fun word to say.
Okay, so I'm just writing that down. Okay, so if you're ready to go, we'll start off with the questions. So I'll start off with this classic, which I think I've asked on every version of this, on every episode of this version of the podcast so far. I was once asked to leave a poker game because the smell of my farts were so foul that the other players found it distracting. Can you tell me about a time that you've been asked to leave somewhere?
Yeah, I got asked to leave a poker game once because I said to one of the guys playing, like, his farts were too smelly. So you know what? I don't know if I've ever been asked to leave anywhere. I know, like, one of my mates always used to. It was really funny when we ever used to go to this terrible club at university. He was the one that always got kicked out. Yeah, he was the nicest, meekest, shyest person in the world, the last person that you would ever expect to get kicked out of anywhere. I know one of my mates is in the sort of Marines, and there were like these sort of, I didn't realize, but there were these like swanky kind of services, pubs and clubs and stuff. And you go there and they're all kind of like, it's basically like something out of a 19th century novel. And I remember I once went there and I got told off because apparently there was a colonel major or someone that walked in, and he looked like a penguin with all his regalia on. And everyone stood up and was like saluting and stuff, and I thought it was part of a drinking game, so I didn't stand up, and I was like, oh, I'll drink 2 fingers, and that was very much not the vibe. So I suppose that's the nearest I've ever come.
Okay. Most of my guests that I've asked that question to have pretty much given me similar sort of, I've never been kicked out of like anywhere. Just like, you're just goody two shoes. Well, we're too drunk to remember, really. I don't know
Yeah.
what to say about that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Another classic. I used to play a game called Slipper Wars with my brothers. We would gather up all the shoes and slippers in the house and throw them at each other. What was the most dangerous / stupid thing you did to amuse yourself as a child?
Not as fun as that. We used to do, and I don't know if this is a sort of a geographic thing, but we used to do this thing that, now I think about it, was terrible, that nobody used to enjoy. We played 2 games. One of them was Pylon, which was literally all that was you go up to someone in the playground and go like, oh, what's that over there? The thing that carries electricity. And then someone would say, oh, what, the pylon? And then everyone would just jump on them. And it would be like 7 or 8 foot of just this pile of bodies of kids just jumping on, and you just hear like muffled like like that. So there was that, and we also used to play this terrible game as well. It was called Boot, right? So
Yeah.
basically, it would be a football and goals. If you were in goal, then you had to try and get out of goal by like throwing the ball, and if it hit you before it bounced, then you were out of goal. And if you let in more than 3 goals, then you just got kicked up the backside. And it
Oh,
it was terrible.
oh.
And if you missed a shot, then you had to go and goal. But the thing that was even worse about it, right? This gets worse. So if you missed 3 goals, you got kicked up the backside softly. 6 goals was like medium. 9 was like hard. And then if it went over 10, they used to do this thing that they used to call the tunnel, which was everyone playing used to line up into a tunnel, and you had to run down it while they just kicked the living crap out of you. It's brutal.
Oh, brutal. I did do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before the
Wow.
lockdown, and they had this wh- what they used to do at my club when we got graded was something called the Polish tunnel.
Right.
And basically you have to take your gi jacket off, bare chest, bare back, and club mates will line up on either side of the mat, and they'd whip you with their belts as you walk down as like a congratulation. So yeah, that's it's
The
just
good
gentle hazing. Yeah,
I've always been terrible at this. This is why I never did anything like that. I've always been more of a like I played netball at school rather than anything like that. I was always more of a kind of
yeah,
like, oh, he's off doing his performing arts thing again. But I've heard of all
yeah,
these initiation ceremonies for rugby and stuff, and I'm always like, no, because I know I would be the one that would get injured in some way.
yeah. But I mean, we've stopped doing that now because it's just dumb. We kind of stopped doing it once we had to make the decision to kind of promote um one of our female members, and it's just kind of like I really don't feel comfortable whipping a woman on the back with a belt. It's just like it's just like yeah, it just yeah,
That's a different
it's
kind of
kind of like
club
we're
that you're
supposed
trying to
to
get
be
into.
yeah, exactly. I just yeah, especially because it probably would have been in front of like 2 kids as well. It's just like, yeah, we can't really do this anymore. It's not on. So yeah. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
they're just
but yeah,
crying, going,
those
"Why, mummy? Why?" You're like, "This is what we do. This is
yeah.
feminism 2020, kids." Brilliant.
The thing is, I think like she's a tough old girl. She would have been up for it. It's just as blokes, we were just like, we
Yeah.
can't do that. It's not on. But yeah, the first game you described, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Staffordshire in the Midlands. So
Yeah,
there's nothing
okay.
going on.
So the
There's like
first game you described is very familiar to me. We called it bundle. We just like bundled someone
now,
down to the ground and just like jump onto them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
now, am I going to guess that you were in Southeast or Kent?
Yeah, London,
There you
Londoner,
go.
born and
Yeah,
bred. So yeah, yeah,
that is a
yeah, yeah.
very so one of my mates grew up in Crayford, and they were called Bundle there as well. I think in Sheffield it was called oh god, I can't remember what it was called, but they have different names for it all around the country. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. It's so yeah, I mean, I think that'd be sort of like an interesting sort of like documentary on YouTube is just to go up and down the country and find out all the different names of these like childhood games that we used to play and kind of like why is there this um regional variance. Yeah, so that's good. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, this is a good one. My friend Anna once did a sit down intervention with me. She told me that I had no chance with a girl that I had a crush on, and that I should kill my feelings for her and move on. This is because the entire situation was making our group of mutual friends very uncomfortable. Can you tell me about a time where a friend of yours um, told you to sort your shit out?
I think that's been my perpetual sort of adult life, really, is people sort of telling me to sort my shit out and get a real job.
Yeah,
I'll never forget when I quit. So I quit to do comedy full time. It was about 7, maybe 8 years ago now, and I will never forget at that time I was like 23, and I'll never forget my mum turned around to me and she went, "Dave, look, think of it like this. You haven't got a mortgage, you haven't got a girlfriend, you haven't got kids, you haven't got." And I was like, "Mom, I'm just going to stop you there because this, I think this is meant to build me up. This is just knocking me down fantastically. So yeah, I think like I'm always I think that would be the nearest. Is my mum was just like trying to build me up, but was just like, no, it made me feel 1,000 times worse.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, mums can have a bit of a habit of doing that sometimes, unfortunately.
I think like
Using the
that's
wrong
why
words.
I'd be a terrible parent. I think I'd eat my own young. So I'm sort of taking myself out of this
Yeah.
gene pool.
That would be a terrible kind of like headline: comedian eats own children.
But it's also like one of
Because there's
those
nothing
things
in
you
the
can
cupboard.
imagine a Channel 4 show being the man that ate his child, and it would be
Yeah,
on in
kind of like
between Grand Designs and the news, and it'd be like an hour-long documentary of people going, well, he never used to nibble toddlers, and just really
yeah,
series of talking headshots.
yeah. Then like, like 2-3 weeks later, Channel 5 would have their version with pretty much the same footage with the same talking heads. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Let's try this. Okay. This is a newish question. As a tween, one of my friends that told me that vaginas tasted like tuna. What is the dumbest thing that you believed about the opposite sex?
Oh, I mean, when I was a teenager, I never used to really sort of speak to girls. I could never really flirt with girls ever. I think the amount of stupid things that I thought about the opposite sex were numerous, like, sort of that if you stood still, then their sight was based on movement. I was like, oh no, that was a tourist wreck. So. I was always a very uncomfortable kid, like, sort of like, hey, do you come here often? You're like, what, school? Yeah, I tend to do it 5 days a week. So it wasn't really one of those things that I was particularly good at. The weird thing is though, and this is probably like quite a serious answer, is like I've actually found this in my adult life, is like periods and menstruation and stuff like that. I never used to speak to girls about that. They always kind of got uncomfortable. It was never like talked about in school. But as I get older, it's just like so many different things that, like, my girlfriend now is like, yeah, well, I started my period when I was like, sort of 11. And I was like, what? That's mental. I thought it was like, 18, 19. She's like, no, Dave, we've finished puberty by then. It's just men that are late comers. So I think that's probably like quite an embarrassing one that I thought, that sort of,
Yeah.
women started menstruating actually when they were sort of learning to drive, but actually no, it was like when they were starting secondary school.
Yeah. I think I think it is like one of the failings in our kind of like one of the many failings in our education system is that men aren't really taught that much about the
No.
female reproductive cycle. I mean, I remember in my maths class, they'd like every so often they'd like heard all the girls at the classroom to do some like sex education stuff. It's just like, well, we kind of need to know about that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Most of us also hated maths, so but yeah, it's just kind of like yeah, it's weird.
I love that that's what you got out of sex education. That if you're a woman, then you got to bunk off maths. That was great. That's brilliant.
Well, yeah, yeah. I think, oh, yeah, pretty much. Actually, that's kind of it's kind of the main thing, really. But
Well,
yeah,
it was also as well as that, as a bearded bloke, they just taught you how to put condoms on bananas. And I remember thinking, even as like, 13, 14-year-old, I was like, well, they have massively overestimated the size of my ding dong, because it is not that big for a kickoff, you know what I mean? And it definitely doesn't have
yeah,
a sticker on it that says Tesco's 4.95. So yeah, I always thought that was very odd and kind of just setting people up for failure. But when you're 13, 14, you're not going to turn around and go, hey lads, that's like at least double the size of my, you're not going to say that. You're going to, oh,
yeah,
that's mine's too big, that I've actually got back problem. All of that toxic
yeah,
masculinity stuff is ridiculous.
yeah. I've yeah, it's fair. My mate, he's a doctor, and he actually, when he was a medical student, he used to go around schools giving kind of like the kind of like sex safety talk to
Mm.
school children. And we'd always used to take the piss out of him because, like, in his briefcase, he'd have a dildo and a load of condoms. He's just kind of like, oh, here comes the old sex perv. He's going around to
Oh,
molest the children and all that sort of thing. But yeah,
that's so
it's just
funny.
yeah, kind of like no, seriously. In his bag, he had like a dildo, some lube, a load of condoms. It's just like, oh man,
See, if that was
rather
my
you
mate,
than
what
me.
I'd do is I would just go anywhere where it said random bag searches are in operation, and just kind of go, yeah, let's go to the British Museum. Why should we do that? I don't know. They've got a really nice cafe there. Let's meet you on Tuesday afternoon, just to see, just to have a go. I mean, that would be brilliant.
Oh yeah, I used to brings up. I used to do uh post-room work at Barclays Bank, and like the stories that those guys used to tell about, because it was a bank, everything needed to be scanned
Mm.
coming into the building in case it was a bomb or whatever. And one of the guys was telling me kind of once like a dildo got delivered to the building. So he scanned it through, and then because he's like the most junior member of the team, he had to actually deliver it to the ladies to the ladies' desk as well. And like he said, oh, I didn't know where to look.
Well, I know one of my mates when she moved house, they've got like um, a box, shall we say, of marital aids. Like they were sort of,
Yeah.
moving house, and they got this little box that I think, sort of some people in relationships might have, and she didn't realize her dad surprised her to come down to help her move, and you can imagine which was the only box that got dropped and spilt all
Oh.
over, and
Oh.
she was like, I was mortal. He looked, I looked, we didn't know what to say. And then what's worse is she just kind of had to scrape this up off the pavement as people watch by going, oh, something's going on there. Such an awkward situation.
Oh, that's terrible. That's really, really terrible. Really, 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 really terrible. Um,
I think
that leads on.
yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
go on. No, I was gonna ask the next question, but you was gonna say something.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I remember, like, I had a sort of similar thing when I went to university that, like, sort of my mom and dad, tidied my bedroom. They kind of redecorated it. I mean, it was, when I think about it now, it's terrible. I was in the first year of university, and I'd literally not gone 3 months. They're like, right, we're repainting this. We're making this a guest room. I was like, oh, so they were busy off doing that, and then my dad found an M&S lingerie catalogue that had obviously been well thumbed under my mattress, and he sort of said, oh yeah, we found the lingerie catalogue under your mattress, and I was like, oh god. And he was like, to be honest, I was just surprised because I thought you were gay, so I mean, it was a surprise.
Oh, oh, that's nice, Dad. That's very
I'm the only
nice.
person that I think
Uh,
had to come out as straight to my mum and dad, because they were both convinced that I was gay, and I had to say, like, look, dad, like, honestly, I'm honestly straight. And they're like, well, maybe I haven't met the right guy yet, maybe this whole straight phase you'll go through. I'm like, no, seriously, I am straight. I'm not embarrassed to be gay. And they're like, yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed about, and all of this stuff. And it was like, no, but I am straight, and people were surprised. They were so shocked.
oh, it's just that's brilliant. You just got having to convince people that you're heterosexual. Um, um, let's ask a couple of more questions, and we can kind of start chatting about what projects that you're working on. Um, let's ask. Yeah, let's ask this one. I once accidentally drank some of my mate's piss. What is the grossest thing that you've ever had in your mouth?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't, no, you can't just stop there. Like, why? Why? I want to, this is more about you than it is about me. Why did you drink some of your mate's piss?
Okay, okay. So basically, what it was, we were in school and we were playing football outside. It was a hot day, and everyone had their kind of like cans of drink and bottles of drink lined up against the wall where we were playing football in school. And one of my mates was like desperate to go to the toilet, and he didn't run all the way back into the school building, so he just pissed into like an open can. And it was my mate's drink, and he kind of like he was completely unaware of it, unaware of what had happened. Picked it up, took a sip, and like spat it out. I was just, oh, this has gone off in the sun. Like this kind of drink. I can't remember what it was. I want to say it was like Ribena or Vimto or something like that. And I was like, oh mate, if you don't want it, I'm gagging for a drink. So I took a sip, and it's like really kind of like warm and like salty. And I just thought, oh, I'm quite thirsty though, so I took another sip of it and then I spat it. I was like, oh, mate, that's wrong. Something's gone on there. um,
Like, on the
I
downside, you
see my
drank this.
mate.
Go on.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And then I see my mate laughing in the corner, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, dude, I pissed in that can." He's like, "Oh, flipping heck,
And then he's like,
flipping heck."
can you tell me if I've got diabetes or not? Because I'm really worried
Yeah,
about that. Brilliant. I think the
yeah.
nearest to that
So
I've ever
that's
got
kind of
is,
like what happened.
yeah, I mean, I can't compare to that in any way. I think the nearest that I got is like last year when I was doing Edinburgh. In between shows, it's really, really tight. And I was doing 5 shows a day. And I was actually doing 2 shows back to back in one of the sort of bigger venues. And at weekends and stuff, you've only got 15 minutes in between shows. So I just kind of went to the little backstage area, whatnot. And one of the people like brought me a coffee, and I had a coffee, lovely stuff, drinking that. And then I always like to go and like welcome people at the door that are coming to the show. So I welcome people to the door and whatnot. And there were still people coming out. It was all hectic. Anyway, put my coffee down on the side, welcome people. And literally, just as I heard the music go down and I knew that it was going to be, ladies and gents, we welcome the stage, Dave Chawner. I was getting ready, getting psyched up, took a swig of my coffee, and then something bobbed against my nose. As someone had left the venue, they'd taken their chewing gum out and just plopped it in the coffee. And
Oh,
I was like, oh no! It was horrendous. It was just so horrible.
that is, oh, that's awful, man.
It's because the thing is,
I'm not,
it's not as bad as piss, but there's just this weird kind of like, oh yeah, it's insidious. I don't know why that's, it's just horrible.
just the idea of something touching your nose while you're
Mm,
drinking something and you're not expecting it is
yeah,
just, it's creep. Shed sending shivers down my spine.
yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. Um, yeah. Did you find out whose chewing gum it was, or was that kind of a mystery that was
It could literally
never?
have been that. That's what's kind of worse. It could have been. It literally could have been
Oh,
anybody's. So I mean,
bro.
I mean, and like what also kind of like worries me as well, because like obviously I just like kind of spat it out and instantly chucked it in the bin. But I was like, if one person, you think, because I thought about this far too much. If you see one person like putting their chewing gum in a cup, you think, oh, that's a bin. So what else had people chucked in there as well? Maybe it could have been other people. Maybe there could have been a fag butt in there, or just, and you're just like, oh god, this could, I just had to stop thinking about it. So like, I've repressed that
Oh,
feeling deep down.
that is. Oh man. Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Um, let's move on to how was kind of not doing Edinburgh this year, because I know kind of I'm a mate with a sort of like few actors and things like that, and I know a lot of the time when Edinburgh was running, they'd be complaining about the costs of like running a show up there, hotel rooms, hiring out venues and stuff like that, and most of them would be complaining that they lost money rather than made money. So I was just, what was the experience of like not doing Edinburgh this year?
Well, I saw a really funny tweet that went round, and it said the day that the Fringe had been officially cancelled, and I think a lot of people knew that the writing was on the wall and it was coming. And I saw that the Edinburgh Fringe had said, "We're really sorry to announce that we've cancelled this year's Fringe." And someone had quoted that tweet and went, "This is the first year that comics will be making money," which I thought was a really funny take on it. For me, because I do so many shows, so I'll generally do like 3 to sort of 5 shows a day. This year was like a bit more, so I did sort of 5 a day, which means that I am very lucky and very fortunate that it actually does make me sort of quite a bit of money. But it's not necessarily about that, like creatively, without being too much of an arse about it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, I think in stand-up year is very similar to the school year, because your Edinburgh is essentially your kind of end of year exams of whether you pass or fail, and it's where so many exciting things happen. And it is kind of a bit odd to not have it. But I don't know about you. I thought it would hit me a lot harder because I love Edinburgh. I've been up. This would be the sort of ninth year that I've gone up, and this would be the seventh solo show that I've done. But because everything has been so odd, in my mind, I'm still mentally thinking that it's about March, April time because literally nothing else has happened.
Oh, that's an interesting take on it, actually. Kind of, if your year kind of revolves around one
Yeah.
big event, then if that doesn't happen, then kind of you are kind of stuck in stasis a little bit. Yeah, that's interesting. And in terms of like the shows, do you write a new kind of a half an hour every year, or is it kind of depending on when you feel inspired in terms of kind of the shows that you take up there?
Well, I'm very lucky because my sort of agent always gives me like quite a nice room, which is wonderful. I think not everyone's that lucky, and I have been just sheer luck. So every year I do a new hour-long show. Some good, some bad. I mean, last year's was shit, but I was kind of because of that working a lot harder this year. So it's kind of been interesting. But look, it means that hopefully next year will be even bigger and better. But I just love having a new hour to bring up each year to sort of try things and see what works and hone and improve, as well as doing. So I host the Best of the Fest shows as well, which is just a great way of seeing all of the sort of emerging talent, as well as your sort of circuit headliners and TV names trying out new material. So I think it's generally the thing that I've missed most about Edinburgh not being there this year has just been that excitement, that buzz, and that kind of community of comics. But hopefully, it's not going away forever.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it quite interesting talking to people that are taking comedy shows up to Edinburgh, because, like, I know some comedians, it takes them quite a long time to generate material. Kind of like one of my favorite comedians is Bill Burr, and he says like the
Ah,
way that he looks at creating a new hour is like it's a new 5 minutes every month. If you
yeah.
can't create 5 minutes of material every month to kind of like create a new show, then you know that's kind of like on you. Yeah, but it's yeah, it's the quality of the material is what you can generate sort of like a new hour. And if it's no good, then it's no good. But yeah,
It also shows you how people write as well. I mean, there was like loads of jokes going around that the Perrier, which is no longer called the Perrier Award now, it's like the Edinburgh Comedy Award. That's like the big dog that's launched people like Stephen Fry, Lee Evans, Lee Mack, Michael McIntyre. They've all kind of got nominated or sort of won it at some point. And that was sponsored by lastminute.com. And everyone was like, that is the best brand, because most comics are going up on the train like still scribbling stuff on the back of their hand going, oh, could I do that
yeah,
joke, does that work? And so I mean it's worked out like art imitates life, that it's now sponsored by lastminute.com, which I think is brilliant.
yeah, yeah. Okay, let me ask you one last question, then we'll start chatting about the stuff that you're working on at the moment.
Oh.
Um, I once heard three Irish actors complain that far too often non-Irish actors were hired to play Irish characters. One of their bones of contention was that the Irish accents used in these roles were laughable and perpetuated negative stereotypes. Unfortunately, I could not take their argument seriously, as one of them sounded like a leprechaun on helium. Can you tell me about a time that you heard an otherwise sound point undermined by the person making it?
Well, I think this is the thing that really gets me, is that like my so I grew up near the Black Country, and it's got a
Yeah,
like a really really weird accent, and you just can't. You could be the most intelligent person in the world. You could be Stephen Hawking, you could be Popper, you could be Hempel, you could be the best scientist in the world, but I think with a Brummie accent, people are going to say, "Oh, that's really lovely. Do you want to go and work the grill?" So I think that any Brummie accent always instantly puts you down. And it's odd as well, because there are certain parts of the country that I think it's like impossible to do comedy to. For example, Newcastle's and Liverpool, because Scousers and Geordies are just two of the most innately funniest people in the world, that it is more like me going to the zoo rather than them coming and watching me. I just think that they're so brilliantly funny. So yeah, I'm just fascinated by accents, because my girlfriend is Northern Irish, and so she's got this kind of really thick kind of. And we went to. She was picking up a prescription at the pharmacy a couple of weeks ago, and the woman sort of said to her behind the counter, like, "Oh, what's your date of birth?" And my girlfriend went, 31st of May, idiot." And the woman was like, "Sorry." And she went, 31st of May, idiot. And the woman seemed like genuinely like taken aback, and she was like, "I'm sorry, madam, will you repeat that?" And then he went, "Idiot." And she went, "Are you calling me an idiot?" And just oh, it was the best thing I've ever seen. I couldn't hold it back. It was so funny because the woman was so annoyed.
That's yeah. This question actually had a supplementary question, which was, would you like to do an Irish accent? But kind of
You go.
you've kind of already you've already you've already you've already kind of done
Fulfilled
that.
that.
Yeah. So kind of, Edinburgh is being cancelled this year. What projects have you been kind of like working on to kind of like fill your time, and kind of
Yeah,
all
I
those
mean,
sort of like boring things that people ask each other
I think, to be
about
honest,
their time in lockdown?
well, the odd thing is that I think that, like, actually, this COVID thing has been like, it's essentially been a gap year for adults. It's been amazing. You can do so many things. And so I've been working on this year's show, which is going to be called Underdog. It's all about dogs' determination and defeat, and actually about how it's a look at one of the things that I get really sort of annoyed about is we do talk about failure, especially in the UK. But the problem is, like, failures are normally people that have lost £1 million, or they kind of like, got sacked from their CEO positions. They're never just, someone that like had a subway card and it got dropped down a drain. So it's a kind of look at day to day failure. And then I've started doing my next year's show. But the one that I'm really excited about, and it's taking a hell of a lot of work, is all of the stuff that I generally do is use comedy in order to talk about mental health. And when I say mental health, I mean mental health rather than mental illness, because I have my own experience of mental illness. But I kind of think that, 1 in 4 of us has mental illness, but 4 in 4 of us has mental health. And actually, mental health is engaging, exciting, and fun. So I've created a 6-week stand-up course to teach people how to do comedy, and that's aimed at people that have mental health difficulties, in order to kind of engage people with comedy and to show people that mental health can be and should be fun.
Yes, that sounds really really fascinating. How did you go about kind of developing the content for the course? Because I'm really interested in people who teach things, and kind of how they kind of like what their method of designing the course materials is, and how they plan on um uh, delivering the material. So was that quite a big challenge for you in terms of figuring out kind of how to structure it and what materials
Yeah,
would be suitable?
I think it's been a huge challenge because one of the things that originally when I came up with this idea, I thought I'd be able to do it in person, but actually with things that have changed at the moment, I think it's all going to have to be done via remotely. And one of the things that really gets me with bugbears is when people are presenting using, like, say, a PowerPoint presentation, and you have just one slide that's up there for like 20 minutes and you're kind of like nodding off at the back. So I wanted it to be like dynamic rather than dull, which means that I've kind of accidentally turned into Dave Gorman of like finding about how to animate different things. I make slides spin and stuff like that. But the way that I kind of approach that is to, make it quite visual and sort of snappy. And each week has a specific theme. So the first week will be the introduction. The second week will be about stage presence. The third week will be about your persona, and so on and so on. So once you've got those kind of themes, that helps structurally kind of pin down. And I think one of the things that I'm really keen about with this particular comedy course is using games to engage people. So instead of 60 minutes of me just lecturing at people, actually playing little games, which is really, really good fun. Because one of my mates actually teaches a clowning course, and I went on it for free, and it was all different types of games. And actually, I think that most people learn by doing rather than being told.
Yes, I think, like I mentioned before, I did teach at a jiu-jitsu club. Hopefully we'll be starting classes up again sooner rather than later. But one of the things I teach to people that I'm teaching how to teach is kind of you need to understand kind of what you're showing. What does that mean to the person that you're showing it to? It's not
Mm.
about kind of like what what you want to get, what you want them to get out of the session. Is kind of like what they want to get
Yeah.
out of the session, and kind of like you've got. I think I'm not too sure if this is actually theoretically still taught to teachers, but kind of you've got visual learners, people that learn by hearing, then like you mentioned, people that learn kind of like by doing as well, and it's kind of mixing and matching that balance is kind of quite challenging if you've got like a
Yeah.
mixture of people in there.
And I think that's one of the things actually on the comedy course, because I'm actually not doing the comedy course for people to become famous stand-ups or do live at the Apollo. This is actually people that have always wanted to try stand-up as a hobby. So I'm teaching it as a hobby. But also within that, I kind of wanted to help personal and professional development. And you're absolutely right that there's one of the weeks where you look at, are you a kinesthetic learner? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? And because I do think that, like, I didn't learn that at school. I only sort of one of my mates came up with this little Myers-Briggs test when I was at university, and I did it, and I was like, oh my god, if I'd have known all this when I was like studying for my SATs, my life would have been so much easier.
Yeah, it's weird the things that they just that's not on the curriculum. I
Mm.
think it's just yeah. So kind of you mentioned that the course is kind of aimed at helping people with their uh, mental health. In terms of um, your own experiences, is this course something that you wish had been around when you were kind of going through your issues, or is this something that you think is kind of like open to anyone, whether they're kind of having a good patch or a bad patch or somewhere in between?
Oh yeah, man. I think you can have your cake and eat it in that sort of sense, because like for me, when I was kind of going through all of this therapy and blah blah blah, comedy was really, really good because it gave me confidence, it gave me communication skills, and it literally gave me a platform to stand up for myself. And I think that anyone else that, sort of wants those skills, I think comedy gives that them in spades. But also one of the things that really gets me is if you googled like physical health, you'd see pictures of like apples, people doing star jumps in the park, sort of things that are really positive and healthy. If you google mental health, there was like black and white pictures of people like clutching their heads or crying or like sleeping in a stairwell. And no wonder people and blokes that want to talk about their own mental health, because it's always like, oh, this is a sob story, this is going to be something. It's always like the bad story on the news, whereas actually the best thing is mental health, like good mental health. Once you've got that, if you're like having a sort of good mental health, that means that you can be the best person that you want. You can be silly, you can find things funny, you can engage with people as part of a group. And I think that's really, really important. So yeah, I wish it is something that had have been around when I was there, but I don't see it as no problem that it isn't, because I think now you can just engage different groups of people and show that the good mental health is brilliant.
That is a really interesting decision in terms of the choice that you've made. Um, in terms of like the perspective that you have on it, because I've gone through kind of um, bad patches of mental health, and there is, you're right, kind of it is, whenever you're broaching the subject with people, it is kind of um, it is seen as kind of like, well, you're only talking about it because it's kind of like a negative
Yeah.
thing that's kind of happened. But yeah, kind of maybe um, flipping the conversation around in terms of like, if you're kind of approaching it from the point of view of maybe someone who's like going to the gym to get healthier about their physical health, and why can't you take the same approach to kind of mental health as well?
Exactly. Like the amount of I think we've changed with like gym culture is a great analogy because like, sort of I think when I was a kid, like people that used to go to the gym were people that, oh, I want to be Mr. Muscle 3000. But now we kind of realize that actually like holistic health, yeah, you just go to the gym to just, sort of maybe get a bit toner, maybe, lose a bit of weight, maybe just get healthier. And it's exactly the same with your mental health. It's easier to maintain something rather than to have to completely build it from scratch again. And it's easier to talk about your mental health once you're healthy and coping rather than when things have gone a little bit wonky in the upstairs department.
That's really great stuff, man. When will you start running the course, and where can people find out more
Well, that's
information
really kind.
about
I
it?
suppose the best way to find out would be on my Twitter, which is at Dave Chawner. So that's Chawner, or my website, davechawner.co.uk.
Okay, that's really good. Is there kind of any other projects that you're working on outside the comedy mental health course and your comedy specials? I was reading your bio. You've kind of you do a lot of writing. Is there kind of a book in the works or any film scripts that you're kind of working on?
It's really funny. So I wrote a book. So all of my kind of mental health struggles, I had anorexia when I was a teenager, and I wrote a
Yeah.
book about it, which I wanted to be a bit jokey. I wanted to call it The Real Hunger Games because I thought that was a great title for a book about anorexia, but apparently that infringes copyright. So we had to call it Weight Expectations. And I don't want to be ungrateful, but honestly, mate, I'm the worst writer in the world. I get distracted by anything and everything, and I honestly could never write another book because I just get distracted by a squirrel or my knuckles or a cup of coffee that hasn't got chewing gum in it. So I kind of don't, there's never going to be another book, but I am working on a the show about mental health, not mental illness, and I'll be taking that hopefully when things open up again. So I'll be definitely going back to the Edinburgh Fringe, but it's also going to Brighton, Leicester, different art centres, and maybe even Australia, but we will see.
Ooh, exciting. Hopefully it won't be um, burnt down or underwater
Yeah,
or
yeah.
covered covered in a virus by the time
They've
you
had a
make
bad
it
year, haven't
down there.
they?
Yeah, yeah. Well, California's no better actually. Kind of like all the big kind of like spots that comedy spots that you think of, are kind of like the Melbourne Comedy Fest, or uh, New York's probably going to be hit by another tidal wave, and you know, California's probably going to fall off into the sea at some point as well. Knowing the year that we're kind of having. Dave, it's been a real pleasure having you on.
It's
Is
been
there
awesome.
anything that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you about? And or, another way of putting that is there any questions that I haven't asked that I should have?
No, that's absolutely perfect. It's been great fun and really enjoyable. So thank you so much, mate.
It's been a real pleasure. I will uh, like guys. I'll include the links to um, Dave's social media and his course when the episode comes out. I think I'll probably early next week. This will be coming out, Dave.
Great.
So I'll share it on my social media and stuff like that. Okay, guys.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, mate.
I'm gonna I'm gonna stop recording now.